I'm at the protest right now in New York City, anti-Trump, anti-fascist protests, and I have one question. Where the fuck is Gen Z? These people are cheering, they're talking like it's just the 60s, it's just like the 60s, and they're having conversations and walking slowly. There's no fight here, there's no youth here. It's all 30-somethings and their children. And then seniors, and God bless everybody who showed up today, but I'm really fucking disappointed in the youth turnout. Where is the youth turnout? This is your future that is going to be impacted by the actions of the Trump administration. And it's really this easy to show up in numbers and show your government that they're outnumbered. That is the point of a protest, to show that your government, that they are outnumbered. And if Trump leads you to believe that protesting does nothing, then this is what we get. We get a crowd of 30-somethings and their children and seniors and barely any teenagers ever. Like, these, oh my God, I can't even. Like, where are you going if you're not going to the protest right now? What's more important?
Me, or is Gen Z weirdly conservative? I'm on TikTok and I look at these discussions by my younger peers and I'm getting concerned because they're starting to sound like boomers. Between the unwillingness to learn new information, knowledge of what I thought would be basic technology functions, and the rise of this purity culture kind of thing, it's something I did not expect.
Between younger Gen Z and baby boomers are not talked about enough, especially in this capacity, because I've also noticed baby boomers being red-pilled in the way that you would expect like a 14-year-old boy to be. You got to remember, they don't have the same tech literacy that we do, that we grew up with. So in some ways, some of them function in digital spaces the way you would expect a child to, that is to say, with ignorance. If you're Gen Z in your 20s or like a late millennial in your early 30s, we are in a very weird situation. We are the final generation to have any living memory of what it's like to live without all of this digital stuff. And yet we are also the first generation to have the media literacy required to navigate through all of this digital stuff. That, in conjunction with the fact that all of this digital stuff, especially AI, is changing the way that education functions, or rather the way that it doesn't function in many cases, leaves us in a really weird situation where it's like we kind of got the best of both worlds. And, you know, unless something drastically changes, there's going to be a lot of young people coming up right now who 10, 15 years from now will not have, or frankly, just won't have the same quality of education that we were blessed enough to have, just because of the nature of technology at the time. And, you know, hopefully eventually the regulation catches up with it or something like that. But for the time being, like, technology is completely changing, hindering the way that kids are able to learn. At this point, I feel like I've seen someone repost a teacher talking about the state of education at least 5 times in the last year, maybe more. Just basically saying like, yo, the kids can't read. The kids can't do basic math. The kids don't have any media literacy. And now they're cutting the Department of Education. Like, it's really crazy when you think about it. We're like in this little window, eye of the storm, maybe, if you want to put it that way. And it's crazy. Also, to be fair, older Gen Z, younger Gen Z, we both have our trademark disillusionment. I think the difference is, though, like, we didn't have an option to tap out in the same way that younger Gen Z does now. Like, I can't imagine growing up with non-chronological For You pages and Explorer pages. Like, I can't imagine trying to get through high school or even college with that. And it was starting to become a thing in college, but like at that point, it's like you already have set your momentum. Like, I can't imagine having that from age 10.
By the way, the polling on Gen Z is wrong, and I feel like you're going to walk away with the wrong lesson about Gen Z being more conservative. Yes, I encourage all the podcasts from liberal and leftist men. Yes, well, not really liberal, but leftist men. Yes, I encourage people talking to their community members about misogyny and racism. But Gen Z is not more conservative. I don't know what to tell you. First of all, polling is just a select number of people that they actually asked. It is not representative of the entire demographic. It is extrapolating data about a large group by asking a small group. Okay? That's important. I don't think Gen Z is more conservative. I think they're hopeless. I think They spent a majority of their educational career dodging bullets and having shooter drills for a majority of politicians to reduce things down to a debate, right? Then they spent about 6 months to a year. Now, let's be honest, you didn't really have a quarantine, okay? You had like a week and a half of you baking. There was no real quarantine. The people talking about that are wrong. But they had a good amount of time at home due to a pandemic, right? To save the most marginalized. Only to go back to school under a different president and lose a majority of this accessibility that they got while they were learning from home, right? Like a majority of the precautions all of a sudden didn't matter anymore because it was a different president and all of a sudden the illness went away because there were vaccines and such. Spoiler alert, it never went away. It's still here. And avian flu is not far behind it. Go look it up. But then, when they got politically passionate, when they got excited, when they started organizing for themselves at college, they were brutalized. They were brutalized by their college campuses in liberal strongholds and in swing states. With the full blessing of the President of the United States, oftentimes hearkening back to images of people being brutalized during the BLM protests of 2020 under Trump. And now many of them are out of college and applying to 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 plus jobs, only to get ghosted, 12 round of interviews, and one offer that is below market value. If they get that, there's no promise of buying a home. There's no promise of being financially secure ever. There's this endlessly.
I think what's really concerning about Gen Z being more conservative is that conservatism in and of itself does not parallel the way of the world. And what I mean by that, what I mean by the way of the world is that the way of the world is that everything is always going to change. All right? The world that we live in today is not the world of 1925, of 1825, of 1725. Every hundreds of years that we've looked past, completely different. Every 10 years is completely different. If I looked at 2015, way different world than it is today. I can record a video of myself in 3 seconds and just upload it to the internet. 2015, that was impossible. This entire idea of like TikTok and all that, impossible. The world is changing so quick. And now in the future, we're going to have AI and biotechnology, which is going to completely alter what it means to be a human. And so here's my point. If you develop early on in your life a mentality that says that traditional values is overwhelmingly the most important thing to you, then what you're doing is you're priming yourself to not being able to adapt to a changing world. So by the time you hit 40, which is colloquially known as middle age, at least right now in 2025, you are not well suited for the world because the world has left you behind. The world has changed in many ways. When I look at like Trump's tariffs, for example, and this might seem like a tangent, but it does make sense. When I look at Trump's tariffs, what it's going to do to America is make us ill-equipped to actually adapt to a changing economic landscape. And that economic landscape was going to change with or without us. We're not going to be adapted for it. And the reason why is because of this idea of bringing back manufacturing to America, which is a conservative idea. We want to go back to the way things were. That's not how the world works. The world doesn't go backwards. You can't move time backwards. You can only move it forward. So if you're a young person developing this mentality, that mentality is not going to help you. It's going to hurt you in the long run.
Men can be a family and they can adopt kids, which I think is problematic. Two women could be a family. They can adopt kids. Marriage doesn't mean anything anymore.
What threat is that to you if those two men love each other?
Because you can point statistically to our society being eroded from within because two men automatically create an unstable household because that is not God's design for a family.
And you think that hurts America?
Absolutely.
For the first time in modern American history, more young men than women are claiming religious affiliation, a gender gap of 7%, while men under 30 who lean Republican have also outpaced Democrats for the first time in more than a decade. Here at the Faith Forward Pastor Summit in Gainesville, Georgia, hosted by an arm of the conservative activist group Turning Point USA, the call for young conservative men.
We're called to be biblical and we're called to be political.
is finding a bigger audience than ever before.
Are you seeing more young men, Gen Z, come into the church?
Yeah, we are. It's very intentional. And I think the messaging from the administration was very intentional.
The Trump administration?
Yeah, it was to win those kind of people.
Who?
And the young people, the men who want to be men.
If you fear culture, then you don't fear God.
Men who want to, or can be convinced to, return to what he calls traditional values.
I think wokeness, is really anything that comes against God's design. It's this progressive mentality. Wokeness is like DEI. Wokeness is...
And you think that's against God?
Yes, 100%.
How so?
Well, I mean, it is everything it claims to be against. DEI is discriminatory. It is racist. DEI says, what's your skin color and who do you sleep with? You're getting to the front of the line.
Can I push back on that?
Please.
My interpretation of DEI and affirmative action is essentially saying, not that you must promote me because I'm Black, but you are not allowed to discriminate against me.
But that's already a part of our Constitution and already a part of our laws. DEI has been used to push people to the front of the line who don't belong there.
If someone calls some points and says that's a DEI hire,
I think that's wrong too.
do you think they're pointing at you or do you think they're pointing at me?
I don't know. I'll tell you what though, I think it's wrong to make a snap judgment. Like, that is not godly.
Because it assumes that the only people who can have good things are straight white men.
Exactly. And that's a problem.
Are the young men who support LGBTQ rights or believe in DEI, are they welcome here?
They're welcome. They might not want to come back.
A sentiment that's echoed in recent polling. 67% of the country says homosexuality should be accepted, but less than half of young Christian men agree, creating a dramatic split with their Christian female peers, one that experts say could have an impact for decades to come.
You raise a very important point, and this is actually something I've been meaning to talk about for a while now, specifically from the perspective of somebody who has a small art business. I design things like accessories like buttons, keychains, earrings, and these designs are more alternative and more like subculture geared in nature. And I want to talk about how like my consumer base and the reception to my work has changed in just the past 5 years alone. If you're unfamiliar with the type of design work I do, let me just throw a couple of my designs up on screen. Things like this, right? Very on the nose. I also have my button designs in here, like I have Say Gay, How Dare You Assume I'm Straight. This one is another one that is very on the nose. I also do fan art that can be a little more adult-oriented in nature. There's a reason that my thumb is placed where it is. And I have been selling my work for about 7 years now, and like the themes and the nature of my work really hasn't changed at all within that time. And throughout the years I've been selling my work, I've always been more in like a niche market. But in like 2020 and 2021 in particular, I saw like this boom in positive reception. And this reception was all from young people, like people even a little younger than me. And my audience size just exploded in a way that I had never previously seen before. Like, people were just all over it. And in 2020, I was 22 at the time, the frontal lobe wasn't done cooking yet. And, I still had, a lot to learn, a lot to work on, but I consider myself somebody who has always been a little more like politically aware than other people my age. I enjoy reading things like political journalism, like I have Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 72. This is by Hunter S. Thompson. I've read some of his other work as well. I'm like slowly getting through this one. But anyway, I was seeing this type of positive reception from young people to my, more politically geared artwork, like, and I'm queer myself, so like a lot of my artwork is focused on like the political side of like being queer. And I was like, wow, like people are getting it. And I found this audience that like really resonates with it and gets it. This was of course around the same time as the second wave of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I remember thinking back then like, wow, like people are really starting to get it. Like this generation really is going to change the world. Yeah, I was naive. And I'm seeing now in 2025 that Gen Z really does mirror boomers in the worst possible way. Because, what were boomers doing in the 1960s, like during that time? Yes, you had people that were, against the civil rights movement, opposed what happened at Stonewall in 1969. But you also had, like, the hippies. You had the March on Washington. And yeah, look at what the hippies became. Gen Z, similarly to the boomers, seem to be surrendering political awareness and just any sort of like individualism, self-expression in seek of comfort and safety. Because that's what conformity is, right? It's safety. It's the safe option. To not shake the status quo, to not push back, just lean back and
let things happen and just stick to yourself. That's what I see happening right now with a lot of these young people. They ate up the propaganda, and self-expression is radical. It's radical, it's dangerous, you don't want to be that, right? And I do get how this happened. The world is awful right now. It is scary. And for the people who are not in marginalized groups, it is very easy for them to just fall back and let shit happen, and they can just sit in their little comfort nest. And for people who do have a marginalized identity, such as queer people, I've noticed that a lot of LGBT people, specifically like gay men and a lot of lesbians as well, they try to act like it's like, like I'm gay, but I'm not like one of those gays. A lot of people are trying to be palatable to cishetes. And, that of course is also a part of like, this fear of individuality. Blend in with the crowd. It's safe to do that. And going back to talk about, my artwork, over the 7 years I've been selling this, it didn't reach like a super wide audience like prior to 2020. People weren't necessarily like vocally put off by it, but, like it was definitely for a more niche market. And then, it exploded in 2020. That kind of continued into 2022. 2023. But fast forward to now, and I also sell a lot like in person. I do things like conventions. I don't bring all of my like super political work to conventions just because that's not really the scene there. But I'll have like artwork up that's like queer or whatever, and people are like very vocally put off by it in a way that I've never seen before. And they will say that in front of your face. Like I've noticed that a lot of people just find it bizarre that a lot of my work is very loudly and unapologetically queer. And a lot of these people I've noticed are like my own audience, like people that followed me back in like 2020 or 2021. And I had that moment like, yeah, wow, yeah, the hippies have traded their flowers for suits and ties. I am watching that happen with Gen Z in real time. I really thought that this was going to be the generation to change the world, but no, that was my naive 22-year-old brain back in 2020. I was so optimistic for the future at the time, and now I'm like... And, personally, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I actually went out and bought more Manic Panic the other day. Because, with this rise of conservatism, we need counterculture. We need the pushback. And, if I'm going to be a part of that pushback, like I always have, like I'm going to be a part of that pushback. And yeah, it seems stupid and insignificant. It's like something as small as like dyeing your hair a funky color. But how many people with colored hair do you really see these days? I want you to think about that for a second. The colored hair was everywhere in 2020. How often do you see it now? Having your own individual style and your own thoughts and beliefs is a good thing, actually. It is a good thing to be your own individual person. Now, I'm not saying that you should fall into this trap of like, oh, it's all about me, and not have empathy for anybody else. That's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about having that sense of self and living like unapologetically, even though the world may hate it and push back a lot. Because trust me, it is worth it to do that.